Hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome back to Elite Physique University. I'm John Gorman, your host. We have Cliff Wilson in the house. Cliff, what's going on, man? How are you?
Not much. Good to be back. Thanks for always having me on.
Yep, we have our good friend Dr. Pete Fitschen in the house. Pete, what's going on, Pete?
Not much. Glad to be on again. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so the cool thing is we're going to roll with us three, but we might have a special guest pop in, and that's Jason. Jason's actually traveling right now down to get some sun. He might pop in. So for those of you that like to tune in to hear Jason's take on things, he might be in on this show, but he might not. It really just kind of depends on his travel. But I think he might pop in just for a little bit to discuss some of these points. And guys, this is going to be a good show. We've got basically the biggest lessons that we've learned. Not just over the last 5 years, but just kind of our coaching career. But really, we could try to narrow it down to really the last 5 years. And it's going to be a good topic. But before we get into that, I do want to get everyone caught up. We haven't done a podcast here in a while. Jason and I took a break. We just pushed super, super hard to finish up the year. And you've got year-end taxes and numbers and all these different things when you own multiple businesses. So we just had to take a break. But now we're back, and you guys will have episodes every week, just like normal. And we want to hear what's going on. So Cliff, dude, people really want to know. You put out some information on social. How's your health and what's new with you since 2020 ended?
Yeah. I finally made a post about it. I held off from making any posts about it because even when I was not, when I wasn't doing well with my health, I was still keeping up with my job. In fact, 2019, when I was actually in the worst of my health, my clients had the best year they've ever had, but I didn't want to give people the perception that I was incapable of doing my job. But yeah, I'm doing significantly better. Um, I would say probably like 5 months ago, I thought I was having a heart attack, and I went to the doctor, and they told me I was close to probably a heart attack or a stroke, and they found out I have a heart condition. So now I have some answers. The reason I've been not feeling well for a couple of years now is I have a couple of heart issues that need some medication, and now that I'm on some heart medication, I'm feeling much much better. Like it's night and day.
Yeah, man, it's good to have you back. It's good to see you. Like I can just tell. We were talking before the show started. You just have more life in you. You're the old Cliff Wilson. The killer is back. Are you taking on clients? How's business on your end?
It's been pretty good. I mean, I think I still have like I have a good amount of clients coming to work with me, but I think that my lack of visibility on social media has impacted things a little bit. But I usually have a full client roster still that I kind of get to pick and choose who I work with, which is nice.
Okay, and if people want to get with you on coaching, what's the best way? Do they need to email you? Do they need to go apply somewhere? How do you do it?
The best place is my website. I have like an application form there, and it's teamwilsonbb.com.
Okay, I'm going to put that in the show notes. So if you guys are interested in working with Cliff to find out what that looks like, just check out the show notes, and it's all there. So, Pete, what about you, man? We've been talking a little bit back and forth through email because of our stuff with Fat Muscle. Let everybody know what's going on with you. You're super busy, right?
Yeah, it's been pretty crazy. New Year, and it's a New Year's rush with clients. I mean, this is probably the craziest influx I've ever had at New Year's. I think part of it is probably the fact that a lot of shows last year got canceled. People postponed competing, whatever. So I've had a lot of influx that way, and then just a lot of people kind of fell off, during when gyms were closed and whatnot, and are kind of looking to get back on track and things this year. And so it's been really pretty crazy with influx of clients. And other than that, I mean, I'm just getting ready to. I actually fly out this weekend for Texas for a week for vacation. So we always go somewhere warm for a week in late January, in between the New Year's rush and the start of contest season. So yeah, we're heading down to Austin and San Antonio for a week, where it's going to be in the 60s and not snow like we're supposed to get tonight. So.
Yeah, they don't know that you live up north. The other thing too is, I'm glad you're a fat muscle athlete, and we can get you all the vitamin D that you need in the world. Because
Yes.
if you're watching on YouTube, you could just see how white Pete is
Well,
right now, and a lot of that's the lighting, but it's kind
yeah,
of
it doesn't help. The lighting's not good and the camera's not good. So.
just keep hitting that vitamin D, man. I'll keep supplying you. Stay healthy on us. So, are you taking on clients right now? And how's the best
Yeah.
way for people to get a hold of you? I'll put it in the
If
show
someone wants to
notes.
get a hold of me, the best way is probably email, fitbodyphysique@gmail.com. Or there's through my website, you can also contact me. There's a link to get a hold of me, and that's fitbodyphysique.com. Those are probably the best. Um, DMs and Facebook messages, a lot of times things like that get missed and kind of in the shuffle, but email and through my website are going to be way better.
Yep. You guys can check out the show notes. It's going to have all of our information there and anything that we happen to talk about. You guys have written a book together titled Bodybuilding. I'm going to go ahead and put that in the show notes for people that way that they can get a hold of it. It's a great book. Other than that, real quick, I'll touch on mine and then we will get this show kicked off and maybe Jason can jump in with us. I think he's riding in a car right now, checking my text. So for me, man, 2020 was an awesome way to end of the year, but with the new business and Fat Muscle, it is just exploding and growing so fast. A lot of paperwork, a lot of taxes and stuff like that, and a lot of learning, especially inventory and projections and all this stuff. And it's been fun. So I've been real busy with that. And we have 3 new products about to release next week. So this episode will drop on Sunday night. I'll actually just be getting back to the house with a truck and trailer full of all my stuff. I'll just go ahead and say what some of them is. We've got L-glutamine powder is going to drop, huge for gut health and immune system support. I did get a powdered L-carnitine made where it's dosed really, really high, so 4 grams a day. It tastes great. You can't even tell that it's L-carnitine. The other one's a blended whey protein that no one else in the industry is doing something with, but there's something added to it that I think everyone's going to be excited about, but I can't put that out because we're going to launch on Tuesday. So you guys can check all that out when that comes. Other than that, it was a nice break. Took a couple weeks from emails and I'm charged up, ready to go. And we're going to march forward with all this. But guys, as you both know me really well, before we kick this off, we've got to do it the right way. Got to have a monster. Cliff, I notice you're not having one, man. Do you have to keep caffeine a little bit lower with everything?
I do. My cardiologist says 1 cup a day, which for me is very reserved.
Yeah, that's not the Cliff Wilson of old. That sucks. I'm sorry, man. Don't worry.
No.
I'll drink one for you. So here's the topic today is the best stuff that we've kind of learned from over the last 5 years, basically. Pete, I'm going to go ahead and throw this over to you to kind of start things off. You've got a number of things, but what's one of the most important things that you've learned from that you want to pass on? We have a lot of coaches and trainers that listen to the show, but also athletes. So what's your first one?
Yeah, so the first one I included, I thought was appropriate because Cliff was prepping me at the time, but handling like when the world shut down and my show got canceled at 6 days out, and when all of my clients' shows got canceled, and they had to be flexible and develop a plan from there. You kind of have a few options at that point, right? If your shows are canceled during your prep, usually in normal times, there would be another show somewhere that you could do, if your primary show got canceled. In the case of 2020, that was not the case. And so your options were either try to hold somewhere near stage lean, maybe gain a little bit back, but stay close enough that you could just drop right back down and be ready right when shows start again, whenever that was, because you weren't sure. Or if you were earlier on in prep, it was a lot easier because, you could just take a diet break or decide, to prep a different year because you weren't that far into it. I was 6 days out from my show, so it's a little bit different in my situation. And so what we ended up doing is we brought my weight up probably 5 to 7 pounds from stage weight. And then when it looked like a show was like for sure going to happen, and it was a promoter I trusted and someone that I knew wasn't BSing me, once we got to probably 5-6 weeks out from that, we just dropped that 5 to 7 pounds, went back in a deficit, and away we went, and it was great. I still looked, probably the best. It's one of the best looks I've ever had on stage, I think, of all my shows at that first show in 2020. So it worked. It just was really rough because, I was within 7 pounds of stage weight from probably January till July. It took a long time to feel normal again after that. I'm good now. I'm matched a couple all-time PRs in the last couple weeks here, but it really took a lot to come back. I was only training like 4 days a week, hitting muscle groups like once a week, and I was sore for like 4 or 5 days, and I wasn't even doing that much. So the start of my off season was a little rough, but I've rebounded, and I feel great now. So, but there's a lot to unpack there, but it was definitely quite the year.
Yeah. So if you guys don't mind, back up and talk talk about the story. I don't know the details, but obviously you and Cliff do. You started off by getting leaner around the fall of last year, and then you reverse dieted again in the middle. Can you guys go into detail on that? It doesn't matter who takes it, but I think that's kind of a cool topic to talk about.
Yeah. I mean, I guess I'll start. Like Pete knows, because Pete and I have been working together a long time. I have gotten into God, Pete, I think we did that for your previous prep too, correct?
Yeah, same
Yeah.
thing. It looked great.
I want to say like 2015, maybe even 2014. I started doing something where we all have that point in prep where you start to feel like crap. Like usually we can lose pretty well up to a point without much struggle. And so what I actually started to do, if somebody was on board with just taking their time and not being in a rush to get to stage, then what I'll do is I diet them right to the point where they usually tell me that they start to have those diet symptoms, fatigue, some, brain fog, strength loss, those types of things. Right when they tell me they start to get that feeling, then we take sometimes like a month or two even, and bring food up and just kind of hold there and back those symptoms off. So it allows us to diet as much as we can off before they feel bad, give them a bit of a mental and physical break, and then go back and finish the job later. And so Pete and I did that in 2016, and then we did it again this time.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that basically, that's basically what, why I was leaner in the fall already last year, because we started in the spring, and I think I dieted from like the mid 190s, and I was still feeling pretty good. My strength was still 95% of normal, down even to the low 170s. And then we held there throughout the fall, and then just had to push from the low 170s to the upper 150s to stage. Like it wasn't that far. And I think we even took like a diet break or two, like a week out of a deficit, even during that last push, because I had time. I was set up really, really well for March. Like we were ahead. It was great.
Yeah, but yeah. March was gonna be great timing, but then it wasn't suddenly.
No.
So give us a little bit of detail what you did once COVID and all that shut everything down. I know you did the Missouri State here in my hometown of Springfield, and that was mid-July. Kind of talk about, being flexible and be able to jump into shows, because there were a lot of people that had to pull the plug. Leslie pulled the plug on her IFBB Pro debut, and like she was right, she's maybe a pound or two away, but her shows would have had to been like 3 to 4 months later, and she's done. She's like, listen, it doesn't matter. Like I'm done. I've been dieting 16 weeks. I'm done. I can't. And sometimes it's harder too, females to hold that kind of conditioning that long. Man, it's rough, especially on hormones. But a lot of people, they're like, you know what, I'm done. Sometimes that's the right answer. Sometimes it's not. But where'd you kind of find that drive to keep going? Did you question it at times? And what'd your shows look like?
Yeah, I mean, I guess for me, I had started prep in like May or April or May. Like it had been like 10 years, or sorry, not 10 months, something like that of actual, like, I mean, granted there was the breaks in there and stuff, but like from the time I was at my peak weight at the start of the diet was 10 months. And so to like when the world shut down. And so I had no intention of getting that lean for a few, at least 3-4 years. I got other stuff I need to do in the meantime. And so I was like, all right, I'll hold out. Like shows are going to start again at some point. Like my thought always was bodybuilding's non-contact. You don't need a crowd, and you can put some people on stage, distance them out, and have some judges judge them. Like there's going to be a show at some point. And so then it was just a matter of how close do we need to stay. And fortunately, I maintain weight really, really well. It takes a lot of food to gain, and I have to go pretty low to lose. And so we were able to get me, the worst of my prep, I think going into March was like 2,100 a day. And we were able to get me up to like 3,200 calories a day. And I was holding like 5 to 7 pounds over stage. And I didn't feel that bad. I actually started seeing like the last couple of weeks before we started pulling back, I was adding like a rep or two, like on some of my lifts. And I was like, whoa, like strength's actually rebounding. I was shocked I was getting any sort of rebound there. And then, then we just pulled back. Once we were sure something was going to happen, we pulled back, and we had to be a little more aggressive coming back down the second time, just because of, we couldn't take it as slowly because it was like, I'm getting on stage as soon as shows are happening, I'm getting this done. And so once shows started, I think it was probably the first natural pro show in the US after COVID. It was the IPE show in Minnesota the last weekend of June. And so I did that show. I had nothing the 4th of July weekend, but yeah, then it was Missouri State photo shoot, another show in smaller natural show in Vegas. And that was it. And we went to Vegas and like, it was like, all right, like we're finishing our contest season here and let's go eat some food and enjoy Vegas. Like we're done.
Yeah. I guess I want to say Pete doesn't give himself the proper credit. Pete is like one of the most consistent dieters I've ever encountered in my entire coaching career. Like, the times when most people are like an emotional mess towards the end, I'm like, Pete, how you feeling? And you're like, a little tired. I'm okay. So I think it's one of the reasons he was able to pull off like such a long prep more easily than most people.
Yeah, and I don't want to spend a whole bunch of time on COVID and stuff like that. Cliff, we'll get on to your first one that you want to list, but real quick, how are you guys kind of approaching, the new clients or the people that are holdovers from last year that want to go ahead and try and prep to get into shows? I know for me personally, I've got a lot of people starting prep. Like it's time. They're going to aim for, April shows and May shows. And I've just started them. And I told them, I said, guys, pretty much the fall and the summer, we were able to get clients on stage. It was really the promoters that took the big hit because you couldn't get as many people in. They couldn't bring in the ticket sales and stuff like that. But from our standpoint, I grew with clients last year. I had a decent amount of people end up hitting the stage anyway. I'm not seeing any problems with it this year. Are you guys?
No, not really.
The one thing I was telling people is if they're going to try and compete, I would say just maybe be prepared to travel just in case. Because, somebody's state may get shut down, but more than likely some other state's not going to be. So, as long as they're willing to travel, I'm like, hey, let's diet, let's get there. And, if your show gets canceled, there's another one coming probably in the state over or something like that.
Yeah. And I think on my side, one thing that helped is I went through it. So I had, I think 5 or 6 clients actually compete in like June, July last year, like right when shows started, just like I did, because I think it helped that I was going through the same thing they were. I had a bunch more in the fall, but I think that really helped. The amount of things clients complained about last year during prep definitely decreased for me because what I was going through was as bad or worse than any of them because my show was canceled at 6 days out, and I was, going through. So that's one thing I noticed is I had a lot less. You know what I mean? Like I was walking the walk and there was a lot less complaining to me.
They couldn't say anything because you'd already been dieting longer than them, huh?
Yeah.
Cliff, let's go ahead and get to you, man. You've got some really good ones listed here. What's the first one that you want to talk about?
Yeah, my first one I listed as maybe the least popular one. It revolves around plans. And God, let me tell you, it was very difficult to narrow this down to 3 because I've learned and changed my mind on so many things over the last 5 to 10 years.
Right.
But plans and even goals to an extent. Plans have this, when somebody hears that somebody has a plan, they're like, oh, this guy's prepared. He's got a plan. And it's like, oh, it's a good thing. And if you don't have a plan, you're foolish and you're lazy. And I used to have that view. I was like, when a client would come to me, I was like, okay, here's the plan. I want to see us here by this many weeks out. And our plan is to keep carbs as high as possible. And our plan is to, I always had a plan for everything. And the thing I found is that oftentimes my plans would go to hell because the fault of all plans is that you can't tell the future. Plans are predictive in nature, and you have to predict the future for your plan to go correctly. And the farther into the future you set your plan and the more specific your plan is, the more you must tell the future. And you can't do that. And so I've really had a de-emphasis on planning, and it's made a huge difference in my coaching, but also in my business too. So what I do is I think you need to de-emphasize plans and emphasize effective principles. and let them guide you in every situation. And so the way I guess I describe it to some people, so then people say like, well, what is your diet approach? You know what I mean? Like, what are you doing if you don't have a plan? And then I say, well, my process is kind of like a scientific method where every single week I have a hypothesis about what this person needs to progress. And so, and then I make a decision about what that person needs. I give them their diet, their training, whatever it may be, and then we test. You know, they go and perform that for a week, and then I view the results at their next check-in, and then I form another hypothesis, and I repeat all the way into the show. And that's it. And I have principles that guide me, but overall, when I'm doing hypothesis test result repeatedly, it allows me to just chase what works. Because if I have a plan, another thing that's problematic with plans is if I have a plan and I'm realizing in the middle of the plan that something else is working better than what I told this person, then they're uncomfortable because the plan's gone to hell. One of my favorite lines is from The Dark Knight when the Joker says, everybody feels comfortable with a plan, even if the plan is horrible. And that's kind of how I have gotten to feel about strict and planning and stuff like that. So yeah, probably 4 or 5 years ago, I was like, I need to stop telling people plans because I don't use them really.
Yeah, that kind of resonates and hits home with me. It seems, especially the last 5 years, whenever I send a workout split to somebody, I have workout plans that are written, and I always tell people, I'm like, hey, here's an idea of how much volume to do on your push day, and here's some exercises and some total sets. But I always tell them, I said, you need to feel free to use the exercises that you feel work the best. I mean, Cliff, you're a perfect example of, if someone told you, listen, you really need to do the bench press, and you're not somebody that feels it well because you're not, but you can decline press and you can do all these different things, right?
Yeah.
You shouldn't have to stick to the plan. You should alter it based on what you feel works best. So I think from a workout standpoint, I've seen that a lot. What are some of the key places where you've seen yourself grow? Pete, you as well, where you've emphasized being able to be flexible and change things to find better ways instead of being so rigid.
Yeah, I guess for me, it would be, probably like show selection with clients, and Cliff, I know, John, you guys both do the same thing. You don't have, I remember when I did my first show, like in 2004, it was, you had this show and you started dieting 12 weeks out or maybe 16 weeks out or whatever. And that was the show you were doing, regardless if you were ready or not. And now a lot of my clients are dieting for shows and we don't have shows. I always encourage them to have like options over a few months of when we think they probably will be ready. I don't think there's anything wrong with starting prep with some options. But don't like commit to something till we get closer and know you're going to be ready, because I've had situations where, I prepped the same client twice, and the second time went so much smoother that she was ready like a month and a half before we were thinking she was even going to be ready on the early end. And I've had situations where, usually more commonly where, it takes a couple months more, maybe stuff comes up in life, maybe they, mentally just need some extra diet breaks along the way, or physically, or maybe, maybe their body fights back harder. You don't know how they're going to respond as they get really, really, really lean, if they've never been there before. And so, yeah, just being flexible with shows, I think, is really important.
Yeah. I do it with almost everything now in terms of like, I guess, I'm really flexible with planning in terms of just what direction or approach is used. Because, sometimes people say, well, what's your plan for my training? And, I could spout off things that sound really good. Well, we're going to do high volume and use this. And, some people just don't respond as well to high volume. Other people respond better to more moderate rep ranges, or moderate volume, sorry. And then, I can say, oh, we're going to try to keep carbohydrates high, but some people don't do well with high carbohydrates. And so, honestly, when I begin a prep, what I tell people is that I can guarantee them come show day, they're going to look their very best. I feel comfortable guaranteeing that at this point in my career. I can say, you're going to look your very best at show day. I don't really know how we're going to get there yet. You know what I mean? And I know that maybe that sounds like a horrible sales job on my part, but you know, I think that I have principles that I can explain to people. You know, I would say I estimate that you're going to need to lose this much, you know, per week, and I would like to set the principle of getting ahead of pace and, you know, making it so that we can slow things down at the end. But the strict plan of, you know, having these specifics, just I think more often than not, it's going to get you too narrowly focused and lead to failure because you're trying to predict the future.
Well, I don't think that's a bad sales job, but I know what you're saying. And for anybody listening that thinks to what he just said isn't the best option, I can assure you, all the good coaches out there are using these principles that Cliff's talking about. Because here's the thing, going on a prep for a show is literally like trying to go on a trip across the United States. And you know where you're going to end up, but sometimes there's detours. Sometimes you have to stop and make a pit stop and get gas and fuel back up, like a diet break, like Pete's talking about. There's all these different ways. It's not just a straight shot. So any good coach is going to be flexible like this. So I think anybody that thinks that's they just have a bad outlook on it.
One time I had you guys know Valentin Tembosi.
Yeah.
I had a conversation, and he's a great coach himself. And I had a conversation with him one time. And he goes, man, I'm having a hard time explaining when people come to me. And they're like, well, you know, what do you think my carbs will be at 12 weeks out? And he goes, I have no clue about any of this. He goes, I don't know any of what's going to happen at 12 weeks out.
Yeah, I mean, and same with like training programming, like deloading, right? Like I know at some point, you know, you're going to have to back off, right? You're not going to be able to like train crazy hard every single week forever. Like you're going to run yourself into the ground. When that happens, I don't know. Like, so when I send someone a training plan, I'll write like 3-4 weeks at a time and be like, okay, let's see how things go, you know, and we'll reassess in a couple weeks here, you know, like I don't pre-plan like when a deload is going to happen or something like that either.
Yeah, these are all great points. I'm going to go ahead and jump into mine. It's not looking like Jason's going to be able to get in on the show. He's enjoying some sun. He needs the break, so it's all good. You know, the first one I listed, Pete, was actually something, you know, we're all three on this show. It was something that you really kind of clued me into. We had, I think it was 2017 or 18, we went to stay at Cliff's house up in the Chicago area, and we were getting ready to do a bunch of stuff. I think we had the summit coming up, or we were all involved in some kind of speaking event or something. And we did a Facebook Live, and we went to train at the gym that day, and it was fun. And you and I were talking about something for training frequency, I think. And one of the most important things you said is that you had looked at some research that showed that tendons and joints take, you know, up to 4 to 5 days to recover. When, as we know, the muscle, especially a trained person, you know, it's done. You know, you can train it every 2 or 3 days, and then you turn around and train it again. Like a Monday, Thursday is a great example. And a lot of people get caught up in trying to train the muscle as soon as it's recovered, and they don't really think about joint and tendon health, especially people that are younger, because they just feel good in general. And as you get older, your training age gets older. That's how many years you're used to training. You really have to start paying attention to this stuff. And I noticed it for myself when I really started to only train my body parts about every 4th or 5th day. I really felt better. I didn't have achy joints. And that's because I was letting the tendons and joints recover along with the muscle. So I was giving them enough time. And I know a lot of people, you know, back when, and DUP is just changing rep ranges per day, right? But I'm going to say DUP because most people will think of that have been around for a while, back when like Lane and Mike Zordos were promoting DUP training, and it was cool. A lot of people were doing it, and they were trying to do powerlifting in the off season, and it was new, and it was a new approach, and a lot of people took it too far, which was not their intent. And it got into people's hands, and they started to squat 3 times a week, and maybe to squat and deadlift 3 times a week to try and get those numbers up. And God forbid you did it 4 times a week to really push it. And what was happening is I saw a lot of my clients doing it were getting injured. And it's because their joints and their tendons didn't have enough time to recover, even though the muscle could recover if you trained it Monday, Wednesday, Friday to some extent. So the point I get with this is it's really made a difference for me, and especially my older clientele. You know, I've had them train their body parts about every 4th or 5th day, and they felt great. I felt great, 0 injuries, never felt better. And Pete, that was something kind of cool that you clued me into. Is that something that you guys are paying attention to on your end now as we're all kind of starting to get older?
I mean, with, Pete and I would say when DUP was really, like you said, kind of the big wave at that point, Pete and I, we had a lot of conversations about that with how, like, we were noticing, like you said, the people that were really pushing the frequency of training a muscle group. Pete and I at the time were like, we're just seeing these people get injured like
Yeah.
crazy, and not just little injuries, not like, oh, I tweaked my hamstring, like, you're out of training for months type injuries. So yeah, we had definitely been noticing that at the time. And as far as, well, my last point kind of comes around to this actually, and kind of what I don't know, did you want me to tie my last point into this one, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, if you
'Cause
want to, go
it,
ahead,
it
it's a good place for it.
yeah, I mean, so the last thing that I learned really is more recent, because I haven't really been able to train in 2 years now, as crazy as that sounds. Um, and I took almost a year off training entirely, and now I can train like twice a week. So I train each muscle group maybe once a week, and it's not even full intensity. And so along those lines, like, the thing that I've realized is that you can maintain muscle with such little volume and frequency. Like, it's because when people see me, they don't even know that I've hardly trained in 2 years. I train with a very moderate intensity, low volume, each muscle group, once a week. And people that see me, they tell me they can't even tell that I haven't really been training. So I've gotten a lot more comfortable when people are needing time off or need more rest time. I feel very comfortable giving them time off or backing off to 1 day per week or anything or something like that. I have no problem. I give people a lot of times a week off entirely, where I'll just say, you need to rest, let's just take a week off of training. Because now, especially with my own body, I've seen it where I'm like, you're not going to lose anything, and if you do lose anything, it's coming back immediately. It was so crazy after my year off, when I went back to even just moderate training. And and this is not an exaggeration, because I'm not somebody who's very prone to placebo effects, but I would see differences in my physique, significant differences within a week or a week and a half, just from training a muscle group, and then you would see some muscle memory kick in. So I think once you've built it, maintaining it is super easy, and then you can back off as much as you want.
Yeah, I agree. Pete, let's kind of hit both these points at once. So I want to go back to the joints and tendons being recovered. When did you start to kind of pay attention to that, and how do you implement it for your clients? And then we'll go from there into the muscle retention standpoint.
I mean, I was one of those people who was squatting 3 times a week that got pretty beat up, benching 3 times a week and got pretty beat up from it. And so, I mean, I was, before all of that, training things twice a week, and I was fine when I was younger and things like that. And, as I've gotten older, I still probably, some things I'll hit once a week. If I'm trying to bring something up, maybe I hit it 2 or maybe even 3 times a week. If I'm really running, like, really focusing on something for a training block or something. Or training things for every 4 to 5 days, whatever, I definitely take more time, to recover. I'm not hitting things, I'm not hitting everything twice or 3 times a week anymore or anything like that. And I have a lot more flexibility in terms of my training as well. Like as far as movements you have to do, like, there are none. And so, if I'm feeling good, like, I'll hit it. But, if I'm not, I'll go find something else. I mean, and hit that. I mean, I don't know. I stress less, I stress less about that stuff these days. But yeah, as far as, Cliff's point on maintaining muscle, there was a study that came out a couple of years ago, because I remember I read it when, like, COVID hit, because everyone was freaking out about not being able to do as much, and I made a post on it. And they actually found that with, I think, a third of your normal training volume, you basically lost nothing. And with a ninth of your training volume, I think the loss was like 2% or something. Like, it was a loss, but it was hardly anything. And I think the keys were, though, that they were mobile. They weren't bedbound. Bedbound people lose muscle really fast. So being, like, moving helps. And they also weren't in a calorie deficit in that study. So, I mean, I think if you can eat at maintenance and move around, like a third or if even a ninth of your normal training volume, you're not going to lose very much.
Yeah, I think you're right on those numbers because I remember reading the same study actually. And and so I guess the thing is sometimes with that mindset of like with the joints not recovering, sometimes people don't let their joints recover because if they go too long without training a muscle group, they're like, oh, I'm not gonna, I'm gonna lose muscle or I'm not gonna build as, fast as I should. And I'm like, no, I've really, I have always kind of known that was true, but now after my own experiences, I definitely know that that is true.
And
Yeah.
there's carryover. There's carryover from day to day too. Like people look at like a bro split, right? And they're like, well, you're only hitting things once a week, but that's not necessarily the case, right? Like there's going to be like chest to shoulder to tricep carryover, back bicep carryover. If you're doing like a deadlift with your legs or deadlifting on your back day, like there's carryover, right? Like it's still not, you're not training a muscle in isolation, even though it looks like it's a bro split and once a week, it really isn't if you think about it.
Yeah, just to give somebody kind of a generic split that I recommend to my clients in this exact situation, and a lot of it comes through, I just did it myself for years. So Cliff, like you said, you learned a lot just because you've had to kind of cut your training way back the last year or two. Nothing teaches us better than having to do it ourselves. And I cut mine back from, I was real big on push-pull legs twice a week, 6 days a week of training. And I still am for a lot of people, but for joint and tendon health and I really like to recommend a body part or two, and then you train it once a week, like maybe chest, and the next day shoulders, triceps, the next day back and bis, then legs, and then take a day off, and then just repeat it. So it doesn't have to be on a specific day. And usually you end up training your body parts about every 5th day or so. And man, I've had clients making really, really good progress. It's just something I think people should try. If your joints are achy and they're not recovering, try giving yourself a little bit more space in between body parts and see if that helps. And there's other stuff to talk about. Cliff, you've got another point. And we're going to get to those guys, but we're going to go ahead and end this. This is part 1. We're going to go ahead and end this, and we're going to do a part 2 because we have so much more to talk about. If not, this would be a 2-hour episode. So for myself, Pete, we're out of here, and we'll be back on the next episode. See you guys.